Many Black people in the United States have heard from their parents and grandparents that they are native Black Americans. This means they were told their ancestors were already living in America before the arrival of Europeans, rather than being brought from Africa as slaves. However, when they take ancestry tests, they often find predominantly African roots, which leads to confusion and disappointment. They begin to doubt their family's history, thinking perhaps their parents were wrong, but the truth isn't that simple. In this video, we'll explore why ancestry tests might not tell the whole story about your heritage. First, let's dive into how DNA inheritance works to give you a clearer picture. You inherit 50% of your DNA from your father and 50% from your mother. Each of your parents, in turn, inherited 50% of their DNA from their own parents, and so on. However, this doesn't mean you get an exact 50% split of all their genetic material. Instead, you receive a random 50% of their genetics. For example, if one of your parents has 50% genes for black eye color and 50% genes for brown eye color, you won't necessarily get an even 50-50 split. You might get 25% of the black eye color genes and 25% of the brown. Eye color doesn't work exactly this way, but this illustrates the concept. Now, imagine your father is 100% African, and your mother is 50% African and 50% Native Black American. You inherit 50% of your DNA from each parent, which means you could be 50% African from your father's side. However, your mother's genetic contribution is more complex. You might think you'd end up 25% African and 25% Native Black American, but that's not necessarily the case. Your mother could pass on all her African DNA and none of her Native Black American DNA, making you 50% African. Let's go a step further. If you have a sibling, your mother could pass a different combination of her DNA to them. Even though you are full siblings, you only share about half of your DNA because each of you gets a different random 50% from your parents. So while you might inherit all of the African DNA, your sibling might inherit all of the Native Black American DNA. In this scenario, your sibling could be 50% African and 50% Native Black American, while you could be 100% African. This randomness in genetic inheritance can explain why ancestry tests might not fully capture your Native Black American heritage. The tests often focus on confirming the widely held belief that all Black people in America have African roots, potentially overlooking other traces of your ancestry. So, is it possible that the ancestry test you're taking is missing something? Absolutely. Understanding the complexities of DNA inheritance can help you appreciate why your test results might not reflect your full heritage. Keep this in mind and stay tuned as we dive deeper into Black history and the intricacies of ancestry tests. Here's a reminder to please support us so we can make more videos for you. Subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We want to build a strong community and we need your support. Now let's continue to understand better how Native American genes can completely disappear from your genetic makeup. Imagine a scenario where your great-grandfather on your father's side was 100% Native Black American and your great-grandfather on your mother's side was also 100% Native Black American. Despite this, you, the great-grandchild, do not have any Native Black American DNA. How could this happen? Let's break it down. Generation 1. On your father's side, your great-grandfather was 100% Native Black American and your great-grandmother was 100% African. On your mother's side, the situation was the same. Your great-grandfather was 100% Native Black American and your great-grandmother was 100% African. Generation 2. Your grandfather on your father's side inherited 50% of his DNA from each parent, making him 50% Native Black American and 50% African. He married your grandmother, who was 100% African. On your mother's side, your grandfather was 100% African, while your grandmother inherited 50% of her DNA from each of her parents, making her 50% Native Black American and 50% African. Generation 3. Your father inherited 50% of his DNA from his mixed-race father, who was 25% Native Black American and 25% African, and 50% from his fully African mother, making him 25% Native Black American and 75% African. Similarly, Your mother inherited 50% of her DNA from her fully African father and 50% from her mixed-race mother, who was 25% Native Black American and 25% African, making her also 25% Native Black American and 75% African. Generation 4. You inherit 50% of your DNA from each of your parents. Given the randomness of DNA inheritance, it's possible that you received only the African DNA from both of your parents. From your father, you could have inherited his 75% African DNA, and from your mother, you could have inherited her 75% African DNA, making you 100% African. This scenario illustrates how the randomness of genetic inheritance can result in you, the great-grandchild, having no native Black American DNA, even though it was present in your ancestors. In every generation, the native Black American part of the chromosome was not passed on due to randomness, ultimately leading to you not having any native Black American DNA. What really happened is that in each generation, the native Black American DNA was diluted and eventually not passed on to you. This highlights the complexity of genetic inheritance and why ancestry tests might not always reflect the full story of your heritage. Here's a reminder to please support us so we can make more videos for you. Subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We want to build a strong community and we need your support. Let's continue. To help clarify the complexities of genetic inheritance, think of a deck of cards. A standard deck has 52 cards. If we shuffle the deck and deal you 26 cards, that's your half. Then we reshuffle and deal another 26 cards to your sibling. If we repeat this process, you'll see that each of you will have about half of the same cards, around 13, but the other half will differ. This illustrates how you share some, but not all, of your DNA with your siblings. These analogies demonstrate that you inherit a random half of your parents' DNA, not a complete 50% split of everything they have. This randomness explains why siblings can have different genetic makeups despite having the same parents. If your DNA test doesn't show Native American ancestry but you suspect it exists, consider testing other family members. A sibling might have inherited that portion of DNA, and if your parents or grandparents are still living, their DNA can provide valuable insights. However, given the rarity of certain genetic markers, there's a chance that none of your siblings might have Native American DNA, despite each parent having some. It's also important to know that ancestry tests use sophisticated statistical methods and algorithms to estimate your background, but sometimes they don't get the mark. These tests examine around 1 million specific spots in your DNA. They group nearby spots together, compare your DNA with that of people whose ancestry is already known, and then use statistical analysis to predict your heritage. Let's see if we can build a connection here, sharing ancestors with someone else in this community. Would you like us to make more videos? If yes, please support us by subscribing to our channel and clicking the bell icon. You can check out more videos on our channel too.